Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole and Jemmy.
Today's guest on this week's external exam is Jodi Wellman. Jodi is a former corporate executive turned executive coach. She has a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, where she is an instructor in the master's program and a trainer in the world-renowned Penn Resilience program. Jodi has a business called 4,000 Mondays and has an inspirational TED Talk on how death can bring you back to life. Jodi is here today to discuss her new book, You Only Die Once, How to Make It End with No Regrets. Hi, Jodi. Welcome to Mother Knows Death.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here talking to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be talking to you, too. I can't wait to tell all of our listeners about your book. They're going to be so into it. Tell us
I love it.
exactly what positive psychology is and how you got into this field.
Well, totally happy to. Yeah, positive psychology makes people scratch their head like, wait, what? And scientifically defined, it's the study of well-being. I like to say it's the scientific study of what makes life worth living, because I just think that sounds juicier. But it's like an opposite, usually when you study psychology, it's about like what's wrong, studying our dysfunctions of our brain, of which there's just no shortage, right? The ways that we act, and positive psychology is like, well, let's study what's going right. Like when we're using our strengths, when we're flourishing, all the things, the conditions that make people and teams and groups and communities actually like prosper and thrive versus, languish. So it's kind of cool.
It is cool because I feel like working in the field of pathology, I've been trained my entire life to find what's wrong. And I think that even in my life, I always say this, like sometimes I'm negative because I always am looking for what's wrong instead of what's right. And I think a lot of our brains are trained that way.
You are so onto it. I think some professions will sharpen that, right? So it's clearly yours is like, where's the problem? Where's an issue? Where's the pathology? Law enforcement is really big on that, like always like attuned to where's the issue. I mean, I used to be like a leadership management consultant for years and it would always like, what's the problem on the team that we can fix? And it's like, well, again, like there are enough of them to go around. And it's like, it's noble to try to still address those. And there's also a flip side where like, we could look at what's working and do more of that, or like, look at our lives. And, even though I talk about death as a way to talk about living with more vitality and, joy while we're here, it is more about the upside, about celebrating, like, what do you like about your life and what do you want to do more of? But yeah, the path of getting there is definitely through death.
Yeah.
That's unconventional.
And it's just hard because like you say that like, okay, just be more positive and think about all the great things in your life. But, you start going down a rabbit hole and it's hard to stay focused on that.
Well, it totally is. And I do think that there's confusion about the idea about like, just think positive, that it'll work. And like, I don't know about for you, but like that just doesn't typically work for me. I like the idea, even though it's circuitous, but it's like, oh, remember that you're going to die. And that actually is like the spark plugs that motivates you to live with more of a sense of urgency rather than doing the thing we do, which is like, oh, I'll do that thing later. Like I'll book the trip later or I'll start that business later. Like we defer everything because we just like to deny the fact that we're, temporary. And we like to think, well, we'll have time later. But you see this all the time. Like we don't, not all of us have time. Like you're dealing with the raw, real reality of how we're totally, totally finite,
Yeah. And some people, most people sit there and say, okay, I'm going to live to be normal age, 70 or 80. But a lot of people don't have all that time. So your time might end this afternoon in a car accident. You don't know. You know what I mean? So it's something. And that's what's so cool. What I love about your book is that it's not only good for for people to just read, all different people, but it's good even for parents like myself to be teaching my children this, because I think a lot of people say to me, like, how do you talk to your kids about death? And I always say, well, the first thing is that I tell them that they're going to die one day. They know that their time here is short and you have a life and you have to try to make something of it every day. And something I love that you say in your book is, how do you not want to be remembered? I love that.
Well, that struck me actually in research. I was totally blown away because in looking at this whole notion of like legacy and how people, you know, how we do this exercise in life where it's like, oh, how do you want to be described at your funeral? Totally good exercise. Yeah, I want to list out a whole bunch of things and I want to hopefully earn the right to be described that way. But here's where I think the research is cool is they say that we're often more motivated by thinking about how we don't want to be described. And that's more oomphy for us to take action rather than thinking about the dreamy ways we'd like to be. So whether you're like a natural human or you're a leader, not that, you know, a leader is not a normal human, but sometimes they're not. This idea where like, oh my God, like I was with a workshop the other day and one gentleman said, I don't want to be described as cheap. He's like, my dad was a cheapskate. And I was like, it would kill me. I'm like, well, you're already dead in this exercise. So anyways, he's like, it would kill me to be described as cheap. And so we flipped that and he realized like he wanted to be described as generous. And so then it was like, okay, to what extent are you being generous? And he was like, you know what? Here I am in this pocket of my life. I'm not. Wow, I want to do more of that. But it didn't motivate him to just think, I want to be described as generous. It was more motivating to be like the pain of being called a cheapskate. So that can be to our advantage. Write out a list of ways you do not want to be described and then start living in a way where you live the opposite.
That's really good advice. I think that I love that because I do, like, just as you're sitting here talking about this, I'm like, okay, I never really thought about it that way. What?
Yes. Yeah. Did one come up for you, by the way? Like, were you thinking of one as a no-no?
Well, one that I always think about is that whenever you hear somebody describe someone that has passed, I love when I do hear people say, you know, that person was just so happy all the time. She was just very pleasant to be around. And I don't think I'm that person. Of course, I wish I was. I do wish I was that person, though. I mean, you never really know what kind of an impact that you leave on people, but I always am envious of when people say that about certain people, that they were always positive and they even though they had really crappy things happen to them or whatever, they were always positive, you know, instead of being like that. And I guess I would say that I wouldn't want people to say that I was negative all the time, right? So it is something I'm constantly trying to work on, you know?
It's a good point. Yeah, the idea of like, oh, she's a total downer or you know, always like complaining about stuff. So that actually leads to habits that we can work on, right? When it becomes like, okay, so what's the behavior that would lead someone to describe me as being negative? It's like, okay, I guess if I was complaining or I guess if I was always, you know, looking on the dark side of what could happen. And so those are things we can edit. And I think that's cool is that that's a chance and a choice to edit that.
Yeah, I mean, that Debbie Downer sketch on SNL, like, really hit the nail on the head because there's just people that you're around sometimes that you're like, oh my God, can they be a little bit more positive? In this book, you talk about you talk about many different things. One of the things you talk about is how you want to make the most of your time and not really waste time, kind of. And you have this saying that's, how many Mondays do you have left? Yeah. Explain to us what that is.
Okay. It is, I don't know, I've never thought about having a party trick, but I think it's my party trick in life. It's my thing where I want us to count how many Mondays we have left. And I know it sounds morbid, but it's totally worth it. So we roughly get 4,000. And I have a calculator on my website if we don't want to waste our time doing math. But the idea is that when we start to get clear on, how many we have left, like this week, my math was 1,814 Mondays left. You know, if I'm lucky, but I might live longer. But like you said, this afternoon could be the car accident of a lifetime. So that does this thing, which is called temporal scarcity, which really is this thing in psychology when it's like, when you get clear that something you value is going to end because it's temporary, or I don't know, it could be like your favorite, I don't know, pumpkin spice latte or like the thing that's limited time only. We tend to value it so much more. You know, we cherish it. We're like, oh gosh, this thing's precious. I need to hold on. You know, I need to savor it. And that's kind of the idea here. It's exactly the idea here. So I want us to count how many Mondays we have left so that we can feel just enough existential angst to not feel like, I'll put that project off for another 10 years and get on with it. So it creates just enough of that tension.
It's kind of a genius idea, honestly, because I don't think that many people think that it's ever going to end for them, right? And I just had an idea for you. You should make some kind of a like app or widget for people's phones that has, you know how you could put in your graduation date or anything like that. Like that might be something that might motivate people to
Oh, the
always see it
life
in their
countdown
face.
timer.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
totally. I love that so much. Yeah. Yeah. And then some people will beat it. Like my dad is now turning 87 and he filled out the thing on my website and he's so cute. He's like, Joe, I think I broke it. He's like, because it says at the time he did it, it was like minus 230. It was a minus. And, sorry, Dad, but you're, as he says, he's living on house money or on borrowed time. So, but I like the app idea. I'm going with it.
Yeah, I think it would be awesome because it's just would
Mm.
you know, with notifications because people like to see that kind of stuff and then they're like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to drink my water today and do my steps and
Exactly. Oh, and not die. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Do you think in your education and research that you feel people are becoming less productive and then in turn leading less meaningful lives? And do you think that that has to do with the phone, social media?
Oh, what a cool question. Okay, so I have mixed feelings about this, to be honest. Your first part about asking about productivity is interesting because I think we're in an age where like productivity is exalted. It's like about producing more. And like, trust me, I succumb to that. I am all about, I feel really valued in life. Like my self-worth is contingent on how much I've produced. It's really sad. So I think we're producing some stuff, but I think we're living with less vitality and oomph because, like you said, social media. So I think the latest study is like 2.5 hours a day on average that people spend on social media. That doesn't even include TV time and screen time. So that's already like, it's already getting even worse. But when we're getting sucked into a screen, we're looking at other people's lives and they're living versions of lives that sometimes we long to be living. And then we feel badly about ourselves because, well, she looks better in her shorts than I ever will. Or like he's on a yacht and I can't afford a yacht. And like, you know, the comparison, like compare despair. So there is a spiral that is super dangerous over on the social media side. And I think that we are opting out of participating in life because it's just a more immediate gratification to just go to the screen. And sometimes it's even just like email. Like that's my nemesis. You know, I will value answering 5 emails rather than take the 5 minutes that it takes sometimes to just go stand outside for a quick second and like have a cup of coffee or like sip something and then come back in. And, you know, so I think we are choosing to get sucked in by a screen and watching other people live rather than living ourselves. Do you feel that way?
Oh, yeah. And I think too that we're not only watching other people live, but it's a portrayal of something that's not real.
Totally.
I think it's hard. See, for me, I didn't get a phone until I was over 20 years old, and I didn't even get a smartphone until I was 30 maybe, or almost 30, right? So I know how to live my life as a you know, as a person without the thing, even though obviously you know you need it now for everything to even do your banking or whatever. But I really fear the younger generation that just has had this their entire life and they don't really realize what real life really is almost.
It's such a good point. You know, when you look at the different domains of life that can provide joy, so it's like the social side, or like fun and recreation, personal growth, like key areas that tend to make us feel like, life's getting lived. When we replace that with the false feeling of connection that can come from connection online. And I shouldn't say it's not all false. I don't mean to paint that broad of a paintbrush, but it's mostly false. We're robbing, I think, a whole new generation of an opportunity to experience, you know, the joy that you would get of going out to brunch with somebody, you know, a new friend, or going and trying a class out and trying a painting class and like feeling the aliveness of like how it feels to screw up at it and how it feels to have it look pretty cool, like the wide range of life, and certainly including like getting out there and it is narrowing our lives in a world where, in my language, I talk about widening life with vitality and deepening it with meaning. And I think social media, any kind of screen, will just narrow our lives in a way that we saw happen really during the pandemic. So yeah, we can't eradicate it, but we can be really more mindful about like I know someone who arranged her settings. God bless her, she figured it out. To have her social media time limited each day, so she limits it to 20 minutes, and she's like, "That's enough for me. If I need more than 20 minutes, then she's like, maybe I have bigger problems in my life." And then it allows her to go out and she goes on like long walks and she takes her dog to parks. I mean, she's living in a life that she loves because she's not stuck on the phone.
Yeah, and I think that that's great. I definitely do that for my kids. I
Yeah.
sat there and figured out how to do that because otherwise they would just sit on it all day long. I mean, they just would. And every
Yeah.
single kid that I know that they all hang out with would too. So you have to you just have to be like, okay, this is enough of this. And for myself too, it's I almost feel like you can really get it reminds me of like a casino mentality, especially the way that it's set up now with TikTok. It's just you just watch it and you just scroll, 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 scroll. It's just like pushing the button at the casino, you know?
Exactly. And I wonder if they've rigged our phones now to pump oxygen out of the phone. You know how they do this in casinos
Oh,
to keep you there?
yeah, exactly. It's just
No.
it's just so bad for society.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
which sucks because there are really great parts of it. I'm sure you've even experienced that yourself with what you're doing now that you
Mhm.
could kind of spread your message and
Yeah. Well, I do think that there's value that inspiration can occur. So if you're, tuning into the right posts and you're not, sometimes it's the right platform for whatever you need. I do think we need inspiration. And whether it's to get an idea about getting up and off the couch, which, is usually my issue. It's like, I just love watching TV at night, and I sometimes just need a little bit, not from a point of negativity, but from a point of positivity that like, oh, wow, look at this friend of mine. She is frolicking on a beach and not taking it to the point of I like her life better than mine, but looking at it like, oh, wow, that looks like a really cool location. Maybe I could look into that. And maybe I could book that and have that to look forward to. Where someone took a picture of their beautiful, coffee and their books, the stack of books. It's always the stack of books right on. And so, and like, I want that and I want to have the cat on my lap. I'm like, maybe seeing that's the thing where it makes you go, that looks like a lovely way to spend an hour. Maybe I'm going to do that. So sometimes I think we can intentionally go inspiration hunting for how to have, like, maybe it's a great meal that is really exciting. You're going to be like, I want the best Thai thing I can make tonight, within my talent range. And maybe that's the way that you get to interact with it so that it actually infuses your life rather than, disintegrates it.
yeah, that's good advice for sure. Oftentimes we see people make drastic changes in their lives due to pivotal events such as like near-death experience or just even with people who maybe drink alcohol and hit rock bottom or something. And that
Yeah.
usually is something that scares people sometimes into changing their lives in the way that they're
Yeah.
living their lives. And you say in your book that you don't have to have a drastic event like a near-death experience in order to make changes. So how can you get into that mindset without experiencing trauma?
Yeah. Yeah. Without like driving on a motorcycle like crazy just to try and get to the edge seems super risky. This is exactly what I'm chasing, to be super honest. This question, I love it because I want us to have the same insight that people who have had a brush with death, they see life so differently, like in a way better way. They're way more serious or not serious, depending what their vibe is about their life. They know what to prioritize. They know what doesn't matter anymore. They have more of an appreciation and gratitude to be alive, whereas the rest of us are just walking around taking it for granted like we do. So I want us to have that essence, but you're right, without, the risk. And one of the ways that I've noticed that can be really possible is leveraging things that happen in our lives already. And I know in psychology, they call them boundary situations. So sometimes it's a big birthday with like a 0 or a 5 at the end that makes us go, oh, wow, like I am aging. Lean into that, be aware, like back to counting your Mondays. Or sometimes it's like pivotal moments like, okay, getting married or having a kid, or it's getting fired from a job or retiring, like major life moments that help us to go, oh, this really signifies the passing of time. Stop and reflect on that. Reflecting on even small changes in your life, things that are evidence that life comes and goes. So you said you do a cool thing where you're candid with your kids already and you're open and talking about it. Most people don't want to talk about it because it's just this awkward subject. Like, obviously, talking about not being around forever is not lovely. But I think acknowledging it, having social conversations with people, your friends and your family, and noting, hey, how much time do I have left? And what do I want to do with that? So not lingering for long in the bummer party that, oh, wow, I only have 1,814 Mondays left. Like, I could use that as a pity moment, or I could use that as like, okay, let me go back to that list of stuff that I wrote that I want to come back to and be like, I think I better book that trip then to the south of France because I always said I wanted to go and like I'm not getting any younger. And so I think it helps to prioritize in that way. But actively planning those kinds of things, tuning in, counting the Mondays, having reminders around you, like your wall behind you, all the stuff I've ever seen that you have, like you're constantly reminded of the reality of life, the facts of life. You know what I'm saying? All of the you've seen all too many facts that are like that makes you a very special person. But I think, yeah, for the rest of us, we just need these like consistent reminders to come back to. Like, wow, we're temporary. That bouquet of flowers, it's beautiful today. Stop and notice when they start to die, and reflect on the fact that that too is going to be me. Downer. But then go, wow. So how do I savor today?
Yeah, I love that. I try like every night before. You might think that this sounds really corny, but every night when I lay down and I'm trying to fall asleep, there's like a 15-minute period where you're just kind of like in your head and just laying there. And I just try to think like, okay, what did I do today? What did I do for myself? What did I do for my family? What did I do for my friends? What did I do for society? Like, or just to help others kind of. And it's just something. And then obviously, like, you just can't be perfect every day of your life. So maybe like the next day you'll just say, sometimes because I'll get a lot of messages or something, for example, from my followers. And some days I just can't get to writing everyone back. And then one day, like maybe the next day, I'll just sit there for a couple hours and just write people back just to give back. Because you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. So just because I feel like it gives you a purpose. Like I could be like, okay, what did I contribute to this world today?
Yes. What you've just described, I think we all need to do nightly too. And in my book, I refer to it after going through the book as the postmortem of like going through, your postmortem, but like, don't worry, you're not dead yet. But for you, like yours is like a postmortem of the day, that run through of how did I show up in these areas that matter to me? And I like how you acknowledge you're not going to nail it every day, but if you find one night you're lying there and you're like, oh, I kind of dropped the ball on the friend thing today, that's a choice to say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to recommit to being a better friend to these two friends of mine that I really haven't engaged with much. That is the spirit of self-reflection and then getting back on the proverbial horse the next day to live a little bit better. And I would also encourage, like, yours is so selfless. That's what's made that's so cool. You're looking at the way you interacted with other people. I also would love to extend it slight selfishly to this notion of the life you're living for you too, and be like, to what extent did I live with vitality? Was my life wide today? Did I do something fun and exciting that just give me pure joy? And then to what extent did I deepen my life with meaning, with something that felt more like I was connecting to people, or more of a sense of purpose or spirituality, or, gratitude or kindness, like the more of the virtues. So I think there's maybe room. This is going to add another 5 or 10 minutes to your night. You're going to need to go to bed earlier tonight. But to really evaluate, like, did I feel alive today? Oh yeah, that one thing I did when I was, meeting that friend, or when I was brainstorming a new idea for a book, and, whatever that might be that you do, like, notice those and do more of those, but make sure we make time to feel like we're showing up to live.
Yeah, that's definitely something I need to work on. I'm glad that you were able to easily pick that out. Not the first. This is not the first time I'm hearing this.
We're going to turn this into a therapy session.
I was going to say, this is like a public therapy session for Nicole. This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room. Guys, we talk about The Gross Room all the time on Mother Knows Death, and just today alone, we have so many cases of Bernie Mac and Prince celebrity death dissections, as well as must-see videos, including the one that's titled Lunch, that shows a woman that was ingested whole by a python, just similar to a story that we reported on this week. It's awesome, great community of people. We get to comment back and forth to each other, and the same people go on every single day to check what's new. Lots of articles. It's awesome. And every single week we do a new celebrity death dissection or a high profile death dissection. So there's always going to be a big article explaining like different diseases, different ways people were murdered, different accidents people have had, but relating to real life events that happened.
Yeah, so you can visit thegrossroom.com for more info.
So you're part of this Penn Resilience program, and I feel like I'm pretty resilient. I've been through a lot of terrible stuff, especially as I got older in life. But I think that that's what makes everybody a strong person when you go through horrible things and then you learn from them. And I just feel like the more as the years go on, especially the society that we live in, just tries to make everything so easy for everybody that it's almost making people get kind of soft and losing their resilience. Do you think that kind of a culture can lead to a mindset that's like stagnant because people are afraid of taking risks?
Oh, this question is making my heart beat fast in a way that gets me all worked up, because I do think the answer is yes. I think that we have this belief that hardship is something that we need to push away hard and fast. Like we need to drown it, maybe with booze, maybe with TV, shopping, all the little ways that or harder stuff, that we can find a way to avoid dealing with feelings, which is an inevitable part of the experience of being alive. Like no one gets out of here unscathed. Like literally at the end, like we're all going to die, but also the journey is going to be sometimes treacherous, right? So I think you're super right. Culturally, it's this idea about like live and wrap it up and package it nicely and try and avoid it. And I think our resilience muscles are just a little bit flabby, like, we the more we embrace the struggle, suffer, grief, tears, hardship, the more apt we are to be able to make more meaning in life. Because fascinatingly, like that's the very stuff that meaning is made from. It's through the tough times. Most of us can agree. It's like, wow, it was after mourning for that period of time for someone I loved, or it was after going through that really hard bankruptcy or that really bad breakup or the really tough childhood. There's no shortage of examples, right? Hardship. Those are the things that give us a deeper sense of meaning and belief that how we want to live our lives moving forward. We could even go into post-traumatic growth, which is this whole other beast and animal. Like 35 to 55% of people who go through a trauma emerge in a greater state of psychological functioning. It's actual growth that they would have had they not had the trauma at all. Now, that's not for everybody, but I will also acknowledge that there is value there. Let's not run away from it. In the same way, when I talk about the Grim Reaper, I'm like, let's go have a party with him. Like, not for good. Like, don't stay long at the party with him. But like, let's go and talk about it and let's acknowledge it and let's just be real about it. And we got to joke about it or else, blow our heads off. But let's admit it and see it and embrace it. And that does help us typically live with less anxiety, ironically. Yeah.
Sometimes I speak about this with my husband because I told you he's a firefighter. So we do talk about post-traumatic stress and he kind of doesn't love the idea of labeling someone with that just because he feels like he knows all of the statistics with the post-traumatic growth and thinks that sometimes when people get a label like that, it just doesn't allow them to get to that growth because they just constantly live with that label and excuse to not move forward.
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying, and you're reminding me of something you said in your last question that I skipped over, and it was so juicy. Yeah, this idea about the label and excuse. I think fear is a big part of what rules the roost, right? So you said earlier, like, does the idea about like not being resilient, we don't want to take risk. I think you said about making a choice. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it is initiating a divorce if you have to. Maybe it's moving. Maybe it's even just doing like applying for a job that makes you kind of nervous inside, but the butterflies feel kind of good. All the things that make us feel like we could be exposed, we could fail, we could be rejected, but we could also feel so good and proud of ourselves if we gave it a go. So I'm deviating from the point about the labeling, but I think it's all part of the same idea. It's all housed under how we want to try to shelter ourselves. And it's a sweet intention. Like, oh man, we're just trying hard to survive out there. Like it's some days are tougher than others, but it's tough. And I don't blame us at all. Like I come by my fear, honestly. I'm the biggest chicken shit out there. Like I just try to override that tendency every single day to do the things that I think matter. So yeah, let's try to abandon a label that might keep us small. And let's try to commit and say, like, am I making a choice today that makes me feel alive? And it doesn't need to be massive. Like, am I going skydiving? Like, don't not do that if you want to. But for most of us, it's just those subtle things, about choosing to engage in an activity that might make us feel kind of like we learned something new, or we had a little fun, or we connected meaningfully on the phone with our dad rather than just trying to like slough them off. The little things that might add more of a sense of pride and accomplishment and joy to life, and risk sometimes.
Yeah, that's great advice. In your research, you found that this is like one of the most interesting things to me, but not because I feel like I already know this. But you found that women tend to be more open to contemplating death. Why do you think that is? Because in my field of pathology, what I'm teaching, I definitely have, you could look at your Instagram insights and like 78% of my audience is female. And then my daughter and I just recently went to the CrimeCon convention that had 6,000 people in attendance. And my husband was just like, oh my God, I'm going to tell all my friends to come here because they're all women here. The whole thing is women, right? And all you're
it's a meat market.
Yeah, and all you're talking about is death the entire time, right? So what is it about females being into this and open to this?
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? The research that's around it, I mean, it is pretty clear. Men would rather not talk about it. Thanks very much. Let's move on. And I think a lot of it can be correlated to like typical gender norms. So like there's obviously asterisks here, room for like gender differences in different people. But traditionally, women are more encouraged and more open about expressing their feelings. And so there is less of a need to bottle up and feel like this makes me uncomfortable talking about mortality, so therefore I won't go there. That would be a typical bottled up and more traditionally male response versus women were more socially trained to be open about how we feel and articulate it. And the second real phenomenon around this would be as to why women are more open to death than men is that we have more of a social system set up where like a friendship base where we can talk about our fears, or, maybe we drown our sorrows with our friends at happy hour or talking about it, or we're able to, have these social portals, if you will, where we're able to be like, can I talk to you about something? Like, I'm really super anxious. Or like, I know a lot of women, when they have their first child, they all of a sudden get super afraid of death because all of a sudden the stakes in their life change and matter differently, right? It's like, I don't know, before I had a will, but it didn't matter. But now I have like a dependent and like if I die, it's like the worst fear. So sometimes those will come up and a woman is more inclined to talk about it with her friends and articulate it, whereas the guy is just like, yeah, I'm going to go. I don't know. I was going to say something cliche, but it's not right. So yeah, that's what I say. Do you notice that with your followers and like the people that you kind of have in your world? Does it seem like those are some reasonable?
Yeah. And really, like, I mean, thinking about my husband and my dad, they don't really have, I mean, they have friends for sure, but it's I think their relationships are not talking about their feelings, you know what I mean, to their friends.
Yeah.
So that totally makes sense. And it reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time is Moonstruck. And do you know, have you seen it? And it just reminds me of that part where Olympia Dukakis' husband is cheating on her, and she thinks he's cheating and finds out about it, and she just goes up to him and she goes, I just want to let you know that you're going to die just like everybody else. And then they're all like, what's wrong with him? Why is he cheating on her? Oh, he thinks he's going to die. Like, and that's like, that just is like a good example of like, maybe how, like, that's the whole midlife crisis, man doing things because they don't really know how to process those feelings or something.
That's a really cool connection. Yeah. the best way I know how to handle this anxiety going on inside me is to buy a Corvette.
Yeah,
I don't know.
right? It's really interesting. In the book, you mentioned that a 4-day work week won't make a difference to prevent burnout, which I think is really interesting because I feel like, I don't know if it's another country or state here, whatever, that they're trying to push for that all over the place and different things. I hear about that. And I don't right now work a traditional work week like I used to, but I definitely did used to work that whole 9 to 5 Monday through Friday thing. And I always used to daydream what it would be like if I could work four 10-hour shifts and have off a Friday. And I thought anyway that would make my life so much better.
Yeah.
So why are you saying that might not be the case?
Yeah, it's because I'm suspicious that the notion of a 4-day work week's a bunch of baloney. So if it could be that what you just said, if it was like a punch the clock, I'm in, I'm out, I'm here for 10 hours times 4, if the math has to add up, and I'm truly left alone on Friday, now we can talk. But here's what I know. Here's what I notice. And this is true of the world moving to hybrid, moving to working from home, post-pandemic. It's like, there's just no freaking border with work for many people. So I think that for many, and even leaders that I work with, where they're like, yeah, we could do a 4-day work week. But baked into that is an assumption that people are going to log in on day 5. Baked into that is the assumption that people are like, they don't know how to stop themselves and they're going to do a thing on the weekend or they're going to do a thing at night. And so I just feel like we're going to get duped along the way and I see this happen. So it's kind of firsthand experience where the notion's cool. And I do think if managed well, it could be just super lovely. Like I think it's France that even has a rule where when you're on vacation, your email is like you're logged off. You can't even log into your work email if you're working for someone else. If you're working from home, if you're working for yourself, well, good luck. You're always on the clock. But that is really great if there are like mandates in place that we will not bother you on day 5. I'm just too suspicious because I think we end up we let like that scope creep of work will flow over into that day. And then all of a sudden we're not getting the benefit of that time off. And we're just expected to somehow do more in less time.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that would probably have worked like 30 years ago without the internet and email and stuff.
Exactly. Right. Like I'm at home. What are you going to do? Pick up the phone and dial and call me? And which some people would do. But no, I agree with you now. It's just, and I blame it. Like I blame it on the company, the leaders, which, there's some culpability there about, putting stuff out there. But I think we also just can't help ourselves in the same way we talked earlier about being a little bit addicted to our screen. Like I'm refreshing my email on my phone if I'm standing in the grocery line 13 times. Like, is there another, like I also can't help myself. So I think we need a forced unplug. That's what would be good.
Yeah, I try hard to do that. Like I keep my ringer off of my phone all day unless my kids are like not with me and need to get a hold of me, because I have this theory that I don't have to respond to your text message when you send it to me or your email or your phone call. Like just because I have the thing in my pocket doesn't mean that I owe anybody that. Like I try to tell the kids all the time. And especially I talk with my dad about this because my dad was alive back when there were like party lines and like people on the block used the same phone number and stuff. But even for me when I was a kid, I remember getting like the caller ID in our house, but there was a point where the phone might ring when you weren't even home and you didn't even know if anybody called you.
Right.
Or came over because you didn't have a doorbell camera and all this stuff. And it's like, I kind of try to make it like that as much as possible because it used to be cool back in the day. Like if even when someone was calling you and you had caller ID, you just be like, you know what, I'm not answering. I don't want to talk to them right now,
Oh my gosh, your example's so cool. You're reminding me. I think I put this example in the book about a guy at a workshop that I did with a team where he had a near-death experience. He almost died and he came back and it was this retreat. And he was like, guys, you probably noticed that I'm no longer dialing in at night or like answering all your emails on the weekend, because they had a bit of a culture which was like a little bit of a badge of honor. If you're like, I responded at midnight, whatever. And he was very clear. He's like, now that I've seen the light, and like maybe he was being literal, maybe he saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know. He's like, now that I've seen the light, I just know what matters and what doesn't. And he's like, I'm going to do a good job. You guys can trust me. Like, I'm going to do good work, but I'm going to do it in the confines of regular hours. And if I don't get it done, it just doesn't matter to me anymore. And yeah, like, and the whole team, of course, was like, how do we get a piece of that? And also like, damn it, am I a sucker for responding at 11 and 12 at night? Like, what's the point? So I love your attitude. And I also love this dude's perspective of like, I feel like every issue in life can be solved with the whole thing of like, life's short. Why does it matter? Like we can pretty much succinctly dismiss all the baloney with that. You know what? We're going to die. Maybe soon. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. And you just like, this is what I try to explain it with my kids too, because it's like we'll be eating dinner and then their iPad will like one of their friends will be calling them to FaceTime and they'll go to get up like, I'll just tell her that I'm eating. And I'm like, no, you don't need to do that. You don't need to tell people every second of your day. You get back to them when you're available. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have beautiful boundaries. I got to hang around with you more. I love this. This is so good because, yeah, this is the only way we start to live. Because otherwise, you're tethered and you have to work that much harder to make real concerted time for the things that, again, back to like bringing you joy or make you feel alive. Whereas if you already create that breathing room and the permission that I will respond when it's right, but beforehand, I'm going to read a chapter of a book I'm reading, or but beforehand, I'm going to go and, call a friend, or but beforehand, I'm going to go and do a collage. Like that's where life gets lived in between all that other silliness.
Yeah. And I'm just so into that because I like I said, like I lived 20 years without any of that stuff. And I know that life could still go on, believe it or not. So that's how I always look at it. You say that you have 7 research-based ways to use regrets to your advantage. What do you mean by that? Can you give us some examples?
Oh, yeah. I just love the idea that there are professional regret researchers out there. I just think that'd be a really cool thing to say at a cocktail party. I'm a regret researcher. So the thing I find fascinating, regret is the thing we're trying to avoid. Okay, so let's be super clear. Like, and I'm motivated because my mom died in her late 50s of a heart attack with a bunch of regrets about the things she didn't do. And so we're just talking about regrets. So back to the research. Research shows that there are regrets of commission and omission. If you do a dumb thing and you wished you hadn't done it, that's a regret of commission. But those are actually not important, really. The zingers are the regrets of omission, which are what would have happened if I did apply for that job? Or what would have happened, like if it would have been really cool to go back to school, or would it be really cool to have taken that Alaskan cruise or whatever. And those are the opportunities that are there. So regret research shows that if we pay attention to the things that could turn into what I call coulda, shoulda, wouldas, we can course correct them and start to live a life today. We're like, okay, if you think on your deathbed, if that was to happen tonight, hope it doesn't, knock on wood, that you'd be like, oh man, I never went to Alaska. Book the freaking trip to Alaska. Like all you have to do is go online and book it, right? Or maybe go online and apply for the thing. Like we can still edit many of those regrets. So that's one really big prominent part of research that shows we will find ourselves not riddled, maybe, but probably pretty bugged by the regrets about the things we didn't do. Regrets are actually helpful. Of all of the negative emotions, they say that that's the prized one. It's the one that's actually most people value that one the most. But by the way, you know what I just find interesting? Because I'm like, well, what one do people value the least of negative emotions? And I'll just tell you, jealousy is the negative emotion that most people are very afraid of because it's just so gross, But we value regret because we also know that it can help steer our behavior. I like this phrase in research. They talk about it as improved decision hygiene. Like only a researcher would come up with a winner like that. Decision hygiene. Okay, basically, we just make better decisions because when you've been burned before, because you know that, oh man, I really wished I had, said yes when I was invited to go to that like cool weekend trip, but I just said no because I didn't want to rock my plan, my Netflix watching plan or something. And then you're like, no, now I know better. If I ever get invited back on that cool trip, like I'm going to go. And those are cool moments, right? Where you're like, learn from the regrets that make you feel those funny pangs. And then that does help to steer us to live a life that's better lived.
I never really thought about there being 2 different kinds of regrets. But when you say it like that, of course, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I do find, I mean, I try to feel like, okay, well, I did this and I have this thing like, oh, there's nothing I could do about it now. So like, why am I going to sit there and obsess over it? Because I just like have no control. You
Yes.
can't
Well,
go in a
thank you.
time machine. Like,
Right. And though that's why I try to dismiss those so fast. Because again, in psychological science, like we will tend to forgive ourselves over time for the dumb stuff. Some people will ruminate more than others, but that's going to be what it's going to be. But for usually we'll be like, yeah, whatever. The thing that just eats at us is the wondering. And because the reason why is it represents the disparity between our actual self, okay, like who we are today, lover, leaver, whatever, versus the version of like the idealized self that we all have secret fantasies about, like the best version of ourselves, right? The version of ourselves that like makes goals and dreams and hopes come true and like, like has a great diet, not call it, I don't know, somehow like is like living the better life. That version that we do this thing was like, oh, what if we had bought that cute little house on the corner, like we could be so happy. Would we even happier? Like, would I have been more successful if I had applied for that job? Or like, oh, if I had said yes to so and so to the prom, like, could we have been happy and had kids? Like, we do this weird thing where we like fantasize about the version of our lives. And that's just crazy making. So I just say, let's put a stop, identify what would be a thing that you'd be like, oh man, I wished I had done that. And it could be small stuff. It doesn't have to be big. Like I wished I'd started a nonprofit that saved the earth. I mean, obviously do that if it inspires you. But for most of us, we're just like doing little things, right? It's like, I would regret, or I'm thinking about someone actually in a workshop last week. She said she would regret not throwing a family reunion for her like long lost cousins and stuff. And that one's actually not that small either because it takes resources and it takes time. But for the most part, like you could make it potluck, or you could make it like there's a way to not have to have it be like mucho dinero. You could be like, let's just have this cool party in the park. Everybody save the date next July the 7th. I don't know. So those are things where it's like, if you think something might bother you, skip the heartburn, just freaking take one action towards making it happen.
yeah, and that's something interesting that you talk about in the book as well. It's almost like this theme of money doesn't buy you happiness kind of thing. Like you're saying that it doesn't really matter what your socioeconomic class is that you can make some changes in order to make yourself happy that could be on a very little to no budget.
Oh, I love that you picked that up in the book because it's so important to me. Because I use words like how I want us to live astonishingly alive lives. And I'm very aware that astonishing has like a connotation to it, that it usually means it sounds special, fancy, like it's going to look good on Instagram. It's got to be like, all the bells and whistles, which like costs lots of money, like all the fancy locations. And I just think, hey, if you have the means and that's the way that that lights you up, go ahead and keep doing it. But for the rest of the population, we underestimate the impact of some of the smallest, sweetest little things. So sometimes it's like, first of all, if we just paused and sat back and imagined that you just got out of the hospital after being in a coma for 3 months and your family thought you were going to die and you woke up and you're like, oh, geez, you don't say. Like, as the doctor said, you were so close to dying and you get to come home and you get to look around. You'd be looking at life differently. And I think that that's the spirit I want us to keep coming back to. And that's where it's like, you could just be grateful that you get to sit outside and watch the birds. Okay, that might be a little too boring for you. Fine. I love that. Actually, it's lovely. You might say, one of the things that makes me happy, because this is actually an exercise I do, is I love to get everybody to write out a list of 30 things that make them happy. And they need to be pretty accessible. People come up with it. They get on a roll. And then like in meetings or like in, the workshops I do, people will be like, oh, wait a minute. You said you just love to like make a playlist of your favorite music from high school. Like, oh my God, I could do that. That would take me like 13 minutes. And then I could just totally listen to The Cure all day and be like so happy again. Or like I could, wait a minute. You say you love just going outside and tending to your tomatoes. I'll never forget this one woman that I used to work with, Diana. She used to say like, this just brings me, I don't know why. And we all try to know why. Like, it doesn't even matter why. Who cares? Just go. If going out and seeing your tomatoes and watching them and clipping and maybe picking one for tonight, and then you come back in and then you go back to your next like whirlwind meeting schedule. If that brings you joy in your day, then that's the choice point. This is going to sound so simple, but like when you have a quick break between your stuff, or when you're done your day and you're just going to get caught up in the whirlwind of the errands or the dinner or the whatever the baloney is, what if it just meant being like, I'm going to look at my list and like, wow, this is something that I could do that actually just makes me happy. Like I love browsing through bookstores. And it's something now, I got to go to a bookstore. So it's not as easy as, going online, which by the way, have you ever been on explore.org?
What is it?
Oh, I dare you to not go into the wormhole. It is, it's a fabulous website where they have live video cameras on animals all around the world.
Oh, that's fun.
So you can look, you can look at like a giraffe park. You can look at, I've been obsessed with a kitten shelter in Los Angeles. I just watch the kittens like multiple times a day. And again, it's free. It's silly. I do it for 1 minute and it just puts me in a slightly better emotional state, which positive psychology science is pretty clear that like, that's all we have to do is try to rig our life as much as we can to just flipping ourselves into positive emotional states so that the next conversation you have, you're going to be coming from a slightly better place. But so, if for me, it's browsing through a bookstore just makes me feel so great. Well, shame on me if I'm not browsing. Like sometimes do you ever do this where something makes you happy, but you actually stop and go, when was the last time I did it? And it's eye-opening when you're like, oh, like I haven't actually browsed through a bookstore in a couple of months. Like it wasn't since I had a visitor in town that we actually stopped and went and walked around and went into the bookstore. And like, those are the examples where we're leaving life on the table, little opportunities to just feel a little bit more joy or a little bit more meaning. And I think it's all there for the taking. We just have to be a little bit more deliberate and intentional about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea to write a list like and just leave it there just to look at it like once a day. Because I'd be like your lady, like with the tomato. I totally relate to that because I'm like that kind of person too. I have like a huge garden outside and so I do notice that I do that though. Like sometimes I just walk out on my porch and I just kind of go like, how are these flowers doing? Oh, that's pretty damn good. I did a good job here. Like pick the little dead ones out and then walk away. And I'm like, maybe that's why I do that, just to get like a little hair of joy.
A hair of joy, you do that. But by the way, it's hilarious because this woman I was telling you about, the tomato lady, was in New Jersey as well. It's like the tomato capital of the world.
Garden State. You have
Garden State. No way, that is so fantastic. But you're demonstrating also that some people have a propensity to choose joy or gravitate towards it. And some of us just need a little more help. And it doesn't matter. There's no judgment. Some of us are going to naturally book the cocktail outings with friends, and we're going to intentionally sign up for the 8-week learn how to sketch nude bodies course, or like we're going to find ways to do things. Some people are more zesty than others. It's actually a character strength called zest, which some people possess in greater quantity than others. But for those of us that's just not our natural instinct, and we kind of sit around with that niggling suspicion, like, could there be more? Like, could I be enjoying my life a little more? Maybe. Well, hopefully without judgment. I don't want anybody to be, it's not about shaming ourselves into like, I'm not living big enough. Screw that. But when you have that sense, like, I think I want a little more. I think there could be more. I want to be maybe having a little more fun or recreation in my life, or I feel like my life could be wider or deeper. Oh, good. Just indulge that. And now for those of us that it's not natural, we just have to go back to that list or go back to the ideas of ways that we've mused and thought, I did kind of want to volunteer at the library, or I did kind of want to go and check out that film festival, or I did, I'll make a list. Like lists save us in a busy world where we're just so pulled in different directions. We need a little bit of an inspiration list for ourselves. So go back to it and then say, okay, well, what's one thing that I could plan in my schedule that shows I give a care about my life? And once you start demonstrating like, okay, I've always said I wanted to do the sketch class. Let me look it up at the community center or at that, I don't know, maybe, the places where you like drink wine and paint. I mean, I'm not sure how
my daughter did one at CrimeCon that was drink wine and draw crime scene sketches, or not. Wait, what was it? It was a courtroom drawings or something. But it was hilarious, actually. She asked me if I wanted to do it, and in normal circumstances, I would have been all on that too. And I didn't do it because it was right after my big lecture, and I was like,
Oh.
I just want to go sit in my room with my husband alone and just eat like room service and turn it off tonight, you know? But
Okay.
but
Love that.
it looked cool, and it stuff like that is, you know, for my daughter, it made her very like happy. She was cracking up laughing the way that because I guess the guy was describing, he was a courtroom sketch artist, I guess, and he was showing, he was older too, like in his 90s. He was doing it his whole life, and he was showing how he had to do these sketches really quick and portray like what was going on in the court. And then they were talking about a particular case, and you should just see like everyone in the room. It was just hilarious.
Oh, I bet that would have been incredible. I want to go to CrimeCon just so I
you
can
need
go to
to,
that.
yeah,
session.
you need to go. It was so cool.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Well, you even highlighted something that I don't want to lose the plot on. Your point about you finished the session, that it was amazing. And then you just want to like regroup in the hotel room, which is classic introversion tendencies, right? Is that fair? Like, that's me too. Like, I want to be like large on the stage. And then I'm like, and then now I shall regroup and get my energy. A lot of people that I talk with in meetings and keynotes and stuff, some people will be like, well, I'm not that extroverted. So does that mean that my life can't be astonishingly alive? And I want to go back to this idea about relativity, that for some people, their version of a living life wide and deep looks very different. It might look, dare I even say, ostentatious or like always full of like fun and novel things. And then other people, kind of like me, and, you know, are like, they could be just a bit of a simpler existence interspersed with something kind of neat and fun that just feels a little bit like, ooh, I did a thing. Like I lived a little tonight. And that's lovely too. So there's no judgment about your volume and of intensity of, you know, living. It's just, are we being true to ourselves? And if we have that sense we want more, let's just go for it. Like, let's do things that give us a kick out of life just again, because that timer's ticking. Always got to bring it back to that.
I love that. What's this bite-sized bucket list you talk of?
Yeah. You know the bucket list. Obviously, people, things I want to do before I die. I am so hot cold on it because I think that we love a repository to keep our dreams. I've talked about it like 17 times in our conversation here. Like, make a list, make a spreadsheet. Good. Except sometimes I think it creates a false sense of security about a life we're going to live rather than the life we're living today. So a regular bucket list is like, oh, I'm going to travel here. I'm going to do the marathon, do this class, you know, get involved in this nonprofit, what all the things. But I think we get this pseudo satisfaction of writing down the thing we're going to do. And then we go, yay, it's going to be for later. But later is like, yeah, I mean, you know, later ain't late, like later for everybody. We've seen the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel really nervous about a bucket list. So I love the baby bucket list, which is far more bite-sized. And it's this idea of taking a small piece of time in your life. Like, for example, summer. The list of all things summer is something that my husband and I have done every freaking summer together, where we just like, and the list is not like, again, back to like, this is clear how like boring and nerdy I am, but like, sometimes it'll be like, we're going to have a creamsicle, because I haven't had a creamsicle in like, I don't know, 10 years.
Oh my God, I had one right before we started talking today. I'm not lying to you.
It's not.
They have these really good ones that are only like 90 calories and they're vegan. They're made with like coconut milk. And I eat them. Yeah, I have them all the time in the summer. They're so good.
Okay, well, now I'm going to go find those. That is so exciting. Oh my God.
That's so funny you said that.
So now everybody right now, everyone listening, on your list of all things summer, write down vegan creamsicle. And it could be, you know, like a little out, it could include real like outings, or it could include, you know, a walk you want to do. It could include a neighborhood you want to go explore. It could be like just little things that just, you know, would bring you a little bit of joy to be able to look forward to cross off the list. Or, you know, like you could be facing a weekend and you're like, what do you want to do? You're like, I don't know. And then, well, okay, well, I'll go put a load of whites in. And the next thing you know, your life is not looking like the way you wanted it to on a summer weekend or a summer Thursday night or whatever, when it could be like, oh, let's look at the list and be like, hey, we wanted to have a blindfold tasting hot dog eating contest. I don't know why I'm making this up on the spot. This is very dangerous. But actually, I think it's a really good idea. Like which vegan wiener? Do you like burger? I don't know. But like make the list so that you have the menu in front of you of cool stuff to do when the time comes, satisfaction of crossing it off. Make sure some things are, cheap and cheerful and some things can be grand. Doesn't matter. But like having, it could be the list of all things, Rome vacation of like all the little things you want to do when you're on the vacation, or the list of all things like long weekend, just because again, they're bite-sized and they're likelier to be accomplished.
That's great advice. So now after speaking with you, I'm going to make 2 different lists. I'm going to make one list of what makes me happy, and then I'm going to make other list of I know what you mean, because like on my bucket list, I'll be like, oh, I want to go to Egypt, and God knows when I'm even going to be able to do that, because it doesn't seem like it's super safe to go there right now. But so I just will like look at that forever and be like, oh, I guess I'll maybe 20 years, who knows, like when I get to it. But like making a list with short-term things that are doable.
Doable.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great idea. And I love that you said like a creamsicle or something small, just anything that you like, that you think you would like, that you want to try out.
Amen. I mean, I like another thing we do sometimes is we like, well, as humans, we think we have to invent something and we have to like come up with something grand, when what about not reinventing the wheel and doing something that you used to find joy in before? So when we're longing for something that might feel kind of full of joy, it could be like, well, what brought you joy before? It could be like, well, when I was younger or before I started working at this job, I used to play the viola, and I kind of meant, well, what would it take to take the viola out of storage there under that storage bin and like try, we're always we're looking for something flashy and new. And that's very important. Like I'm a big proponent of adding novelty into life. But I also know that if the path of least resistance is that you're not going to do anything about it, and you have a viola under the stairs somewhere, maybe take out the viola, or like brush off the paint canvas, or download Duolingo, like do something that you already know brought you joy, and maybe just rekindle that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was just really great, and this was like a free therapy session for me. Thanks for that.
I got therapy too. I feel like I now am making some life changes as a result of talking to you. I'm definitely going to CrimeCon, so thanks.
Yeah, and getting the vegan creamsicles tonight. I'm not a vegan person, by the way, but I bought them for one of my kids is lactose intolerant, and she didn't like them, and I was like, oh, let me try it, and I was like, oh, this is good, and then I kept getting.
Yeah, this will do.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I love that.
Are you working on any new projects or anything you could talk about with us?
Oh, thank you for asking. Right now, I'm still just basking in the excitement of my book coming out, You Only Die Once. So that to me is like, it's all book all the time. Oh yeah. And also planning to, do some living around Netflix. So yeah, the book. And then, maybe coming up with a retreat at some point soon, but really it's all things You Only Die Once.
I love that. Where can everybody find you? You on social media or anything?
Yeah, so I am at 4000 Mondays. So you have to spell out FOURTHOUSAND Mondays on Instagram. And I'm at 4000mondays.com. So I do a weekly blog where I get to talk all about this fun stuff. And so come hang out.
I love that. Well, everybody go follow, because I think hearing more tidbits like this is just going to really, I really am like looking forward to this. Honestly, thank you so much.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the anatomy book outside.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.